Hi, good morning, Hongxia. It's so lovely to have you here with us in London. And as the weather and the tube keeps testing us, I'm so glad you're here in person and we have you. I already know a lot about your illustrious career through my stalking skills on LinkedIn. But other than that, I would really love it if you could tell us a little bit more about your background and your role at Acumen.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Ananya. It's a pleasure for me to be here. And I think the most relevant to this conversation about my career is that I have served as a founding associate vice chancellor for NYU Shanghai for 5 years. And that was first 2 years as associate vice chancellor and chief operating officer, oversighting all the administrative functions of a new university. And for the next 3 years, I served as associate vice chancellor for government and external relations. So I think that's the experience I think I will draw at large for today's conversation.
Wonderful. Those are some really big shoes to fill in, I think, and you've already done a wonderful job because we can see a lot of NYU, like wonderful initiatives at NYU Shanghai and otherwise, how successful it has been in China and in comparison to other branch campuses established across the world. And I think as coming back to the Indian international higher education sector, the opportunity has risen for India to now internationalize its higher education system through establishing branch campuses. And as you already might know, we have just released the draft guidelines on establishing branch campuses in India. And it's a draft at the moment, so there's a long way for us to go and have a dedicated guidelines on establishing branch campuses. But what I want to know from you, Hongxia, is how you think of India in this respect, and as compared to your experience with China, and do you think it's a feasibility? Do you think in the future we will have NYU in India?
Well, I don't know whether it's going to be an NYU in India, but I can tell on a personal level, I'm very excited about the new India national education policy. I have got to know India a lot more in the last few years as a board director for SNMS4. And I'm very grateful to this company in allowing me to really get to know India on a professional level. And as an international student myself, 3 or even 4 decades ago in the United States, I have met many Indian students in my classroom on campus. And as the years passing by, I have seen a lot more international students in the United States from India, but also generally from South Asia. And I think perhaps the time is ripe to allow those top universities internationally to have branch campus in India, because there is a need. I think you may agree with me. I think the need is there to allow more, but also better education for students who are in India, but also in South Asia. And that way they can receive this international education, but without leaving their home country or their neighboring country. So I feel there is a great need, and the government of India is trying to fulfill that need by introducing and connecting international universities to India and providing the right background and the right ground to these universities who may venture to open their branch offices, branch campus.
Wonderful, yeah, and you're absolutely right in saying, Hongxia, that with the national education policy released in 2020, India is leapfrogging into the next era of higher education, and the system is changing a lot, and we're seeing those changes come into play where via these new policies and new draft guidelines or other initiatives by the UGC or the AICTE and otherwise. But in your experience, what is it that we need to be mindful of as part of people working in the higher education sector, that we see, in terms of international education or entry of branch campuses in India?
Well, I have been thinking about this, and I feel like there's so much can be shared and also exchanged. And I have gathered some feedbacks from the academic world, for example, from the US, but also from India, professors who anticipate about the change that may be brought along by this new education policy. And I feel for those professors on both sides and what their concerns may be. But I have a different, perhaps, viewpoint for this new direction that Indian government is pointing us to. And my observations, I feel like, can be summarized perhaps by 9 words in the order of ABC to make it easy to understand and also remember. And those words are really from my personal and professional experience by working for NYU Shanghai. So I have 3 A's, and the first A is academic freedom. And I have gathered a lot of feedback, and in this feedback, they tend to say academic autonomy. I prefer the word academic freedom because all these 9 words I would be saying is really from the viewpoint of international universities. So autonomy perhaps really would create some kind of gap between the main campus versus the branch campus. But I think if we say academic freedom, that would connect both kinds of campus because academic freedom really has no national borders. If you are a university, whether you're in the US or UK, in China, in India, we all have this ideal that is academic freedom. So within the campus wall, you're not afraid to think independently and critically. You're not afraid to innovate and to create. That is the key for university to exist. Right. And to be a leader in terms of thoughts for society. So I think academic freedom is very, very important. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I feel the academic standard is very important too, because supposedly the main campus versus branch campus, they all adhere to the same academic standard. And after that, there is academic integration. That integration really is important so that you connect this main and branch office together because they are supposed to be one university despite they have different campus. So academic freedom, academic standard, and academic integration. They are all very important keywords to me as our goals. So the next one is going to be B, 3 B's. So what are they? I think, number 1, these universities, the international universities, they should be brave.
Absolutely.
They should be bold, and they should be balanced. When you're creating a branch office outside your own country, your own comfort zone, and your own cultural context. So brave means you are not afraid to step into a new territory. And bold means that you may be creating something new and with strong footstep. And balanced means you have to look both ways and make sure whatever changes you're going to be making is going to be well-grounded and well-rounded, so they are balanced. They consider the needs and also perhaps history and cultural context of both countries.
Absolutely.
So that's the 3B. And 3C means that to implement all these goals that I have talked about in terms of A's, 3A's, and 3B's, you need to communicate. And I really mean it. Communication across these 2 campuses, 2 countries, and 2 different group of staff, students, and parents, as well as faculty that need constant, continuous communication. And communication is really the key to make these ventures successful.
Absolutely.
And then your attitude. The attitude means you need to collaborate and be collaborative. And it means you are a good listener, good observer. It's not only just one side. Both sides need to observe the other and put their really perspectives in reversal. So that way you can better understand each other. Because the reality is there is gap in many things you do on the campus, in one versus other. So you got to have that kind of outlook, and that is be collaborative.
Yes.
And the third is you perhaps have to make compromise at some point. Not compromise on academic standards, nor academic freedom, because that is our ideal, that's our goals to work for. But I think compromise, it's really on a lot of daily operational and administrative sides.
Absolutely.
Which I have personally experienced many, and I do make compromises sometimes. And that compromise, it's not really about the end result, but it's about the process. So there is an old saying there is many roads to Rome. Some there are highways, others there are trails. So depends on your time, your resources, and your capacity at one point. We may have to make compromise in terms of the process to reach our goals. So that is what I mean, the 3 C's: communicate and cooperate and compromise.
Absolutely.
And I would say, these are the points I really like to bring it out for our clients, our customers, but also for our partners in education industries, but also in the government to think about.
Absolutely.
And I have worked with 2 wonderful colleagues. On one side, the NYU. On the other side, the Eastern China Normal University, because they are the 2 partner universities in creating NYU Shanghai. And the former president of NYU, Professor John Sexton, and he has written a book in the last few years, and I believe it was published in 2019, around that time in the US. It's called Standing for Reason, the University in a Dogmatic Age. So that book actually has many discussions about internationalization of higher education, and specifically about NYU campuses in Abu Dhabi, but also Shanghai. There are a lot of good high-level discussion, but also detailed discussions about the operational level of these campus. On the other side, the former president of ECNU, Professor Yu Lizhong, also authored a book recently, and he talked about his other side about how this NYU Shanghai was created and lessons he learned as the founding chancellor for NYU Shanghai. So I would highly recommend anyone who would want to peek into this process in creating these joint venture universities or international campuses of a leading research university. Go ahead and order this book and read yourself. And I have read both of their books, and I have worked with colleagues, and I highly recommend those books.
Absolutely. I mean, I've got that on my list for books to read in 2023. Hopefully, it'll happen right after this podcast for sure. And thank you so much, Hongxia, for pointing out, I mean, you know, the recipe for a successful marriage, I think, between international universities and the entry of and the entry of these institutions in India, and between the government and stakeholders and various parties involved. And you're absolutely right in saying that international universities will have to be brave and bold and courageous to be entering into in a new cultural context, and will have to make compromises somewhere or the other, and also be mindful of how differently the processes would work as compared to, I think, China, or for that matter, Abu Dhabi as well. And it's really interesting to see that, you know, you've read so vastly about it, and you know so much, and a lot comes from experience, of course. But I also know that NYU is one of the is one of the top ranked universities in the world or so, and I think comes amongst universities that people really want to study at, and whether that's from India or China or otherwise from other countries as well, students know the name NYU. And this is a similar case for other universities in the US, in the UK, a lot of our partners as well. And what I want to know from you is that the recent draft guidelines have highlighted that the entry of only top 500 institutions in the world, will be allowed to establish branch campuses, or you have to be a reputed university in your home country as well. And I mean, there are a lot of universities that may not fall into this category, but have a lot to offer, and especially in the cultural context of India and the vast needs of access and equity that we have in our nation. So what is your advice to the government or people that, are hoping to enter this space?
Well, I think from what I have remembered, the initial number of universities from the National Education Policy draft was about 1,000 university. That was a wish from the Indian government. And then this draft, the latest, it is really been narrowed down. Hold on, excuse me. I think I actually did not say it right. The initial one was 100.
100 in the NEP.
Exactly.
Then they increased it to 1,000 and back to 500. And you can be a reputed.
And there was a discussion about 1,000.
A lot of confusion around
exactly.
that.
So there was some confusion. And, if you look at the ranking of the university, there would be top 100 university around the world ranked by different rankings.
Yeah.
Right? The some of the top threes that like QS and Times Higher Education, and then there is a Chinese Jiao Tong University. They have their own ranking too. But you look at these rankings, there majority of the university, they actually are listed in sync in terms of ranking,
Absolutely.
not far from each other. So if you look at these, say, 3 rankings, and you look at these top 100 universities, where are they? I think about up and down, just about 50, they're in the US. About 20, they're in the UK, and followed by about 10 in Germany. And of course, there are many other countries, France, Japan, Switzerland, so Australia, of course. So they are there. We know most likely who are the 100 some top universities in the world. And then it comes down to 500. That is a much larger landscape of universities. And if you count into 1,000, it's going to be enormous, right? So in terms of advice, I don't really have much, but I do have opinion. Yeah. I think if I read from the national education policy from India government, the aspiration is really to open this higher education space to allow top international university to come in order to bring Indian universities and Indian higher education industry to a higher level.
Yes.
Not to make more university perhaps, but to make better and higher level university. So that's really the quality counts, to increase the quality of education in the higher learning institutions in India. So if the quality is that aspiration, I personally think it may not serve the purpose if you enlarge the number from, say, 500 to 1,000. Right? Or even 100 to 500, because 500 is a large number already.
Yes.
So I thought, why not just put 250? Make it even more, more selective.
Yeah.
I mean, 100, it's probably very selective, right? But I think 250 might be somewhere more reasonable if your goal is about quality, instead of quantity. I would think, compare these three lists, there would be 250 university. They are commonly ranked by all the ranks, and they are well spread in different countries, not just UK, not just US, not just Germany. It would be a wider spread, and then still very much quality university to come to India. So I personally think 500 is a lot. But maybe you want further narrow it down. But if you narrow down to 100, you are refined. I mean, you are confined, actually, right? So I would think, perhaps somewhere between 100 and 500, and I think 250 would be a reasonable cut.
Yeah. No, absolutely, you're right. I think 250, but even beyond that, sometimes, our own Indian institutions do not rank in the top 300.
Right.
And we've got some really good quality institutions that do not make it big, maybe because of research output or different parameters set out by Times Higher Education rankings or QS rankings as well. And somewhere or the other, maybe a rankings is not the right parameter to look at when deciding on international university, the entry of international universities. And I would definitely say that there is great research output, international faculty, a lot of efficient administration and process and policy making around these institutions, which feature in the top 100 or the top 250 as well.
Right.
But do you think somewhere or the other it will limit the goals of the NEP in some senses or the other, where we're trying to achieve access and equity? We're trying to cater to a population that, is used to paying just, I would say, about £90 a year for studying in a government institutions, compared to, entry of international universities will somewhere or the other take the tuition fee to a higher level as well. And to have that sense of variety and the choice to choose from when you're also choosing to study in an institution that is international in its outlook, but also has is in partnership with an Indian university or different forms of partnerships that might be set up. What is your view regarding, I would say that beyond these rankings, is there, do you think the entry of international universities in India would be a feasible step forward?
Well, I think, yes, the reality is that the previous model of higher education in India, or current one, it cost much less than to go to a university abroad, or perhaps an international campus of a top world university who has branch campus in India. That's the reality. So there is a huge gap in terms of tuition. So how you solve that challenge and make these better, higher quality international education more affordable to Indian students, I think that is a very important and critical challenge. So that's where I think scholarships would really make this feasible for many Indian students who otherwise cannot afford that quality and international education here at home in India. Scholarships comes from different resources. It can come from the government in terms of grants and loans, low interest loans for Indian students. It can also come from in the form of scholarship from private corporations, citizens who can help create these educational foundations to support those students who cannot afford.
Right.
Here at NYU Shanghai, we have scholarships, fellowships from the government, but also from private citizens and alumni, friends. So that can and that have helped our students who otherwise cannot not afford NYU level tuition to study at NYU Shanghai. So finance for education, especially higher education, has always been a challenge to many families as well as universities. But we just have to put our brain together to solve this challenge.
Yeah.
And I would be very interested to learn, what other possibilities can be found in India. And I think, India is a country with long history and with such brilliant people. They may have their own way to solve this problem.
Yeah.
And, taking lessons learned from other countries and provide the best solution for the Indian students and their parents.
Absolutely. That is really good to know. So, this is where we're talking about being bold and being brave and being compromising in some ways and collaborative and integrating the system between your home campus, your flagship campus, and the institutions in India. But coming back to your A's, I think one was about academic freedom, and this is a lot of feedback we've got from international universities regarding the draft guidelines as well. And there is this phrase in one of the guidelines which says that we will not be allowing any subjects to be taught at these institutions, foreign higher education institutions that come to India, that jeopardize national interest of any kind. And that talks a lot about academic freedom, because recently there has been talk about it in Indian institutions as well. And I just wanted to know from your own experience and your expertise in this area, have you come across similar challenges and how did you deal with them?
Well, I think from day one at NYU Shanghai, I think our senior academic officers and also administrative officers at all levels, we have these conscientious that academic freedom is something we will uphold. But that academic freedom cannot be equated with the concept of political freedom in a particular country. It's very different thing. different concept, different practice. So we are a branch campus. So our faculty, our students, our staff would need to abide the laws of China. And there are quite extensive laws that governs many aspects of a university life as a cell of the society. We're just one university, despite joint venture university, but it's a university that is in China, right? So we have to be aware of the laws and then abide by the law. But then on the other hand, we are an academic institution. So we have classrooms, we have dorms, we have faculty housing, we have cafeteria, we have conference room. Whatever take place on the university side in the classroom, that is protected by the ideal and our belief it's academic freedom. So our university professor and students and staff, they must do everything to uphold this.
Absolutely.
Right? So I think, this is a question about national interest. This word has a lot of ambiguity. And of course, in an education policy context, you cannot elaborate too much. What does it mean to have national interest in this context? But I think, there would be a lot of Indian laws that would deal with national interest, whether you're talking about science or industries or intellectual property, copyright, whatever, trademark. That's all that, it's something a university have to be aware of. So I think this is like a process. No one can really preface this discussion at this point. You just have to walk the rope as the journey advances and to learn along the journey, because without a specific law involved, it's very hard to talk about, academic world versus national interest. We just have to be very specific. Once we are in that situation, we could discern the space and then work out a way that you can do both. You can not interfere with national interests, but in the meantime, guard your academic freedom.
Absolutely. This is really interesting because I think there are debates about this around the world, not just India. And you're absolutely right in saying that we need to walk down this road and figure it out as along the way and how that would work, and keeping in mind the laws of each country, the cultural contexts, and other requirements that the government may have or
Right.
the context may have.
Right.
And
may I add one point?
Absolutely.
Actually, on that, it's not just an international branch office. They have to be concerned about guarding academic freedom on campus versus national interest of the host country, like
Absolutely.
India. But actually, even an international university like NYU, in terms of the main campus in New York, they have to be concerned about this too. How you guard your academic freedom, but in the meantime, not interfering with national interest. This is an issue. It's not just pertaining to a branch office in India for any other university, but it's also issue their home campus has to be concerned with their home country.
absolutely.
So it's not just an issue that a branch office has to be concerned. The main campus
also has to.
also has to be concerned. Yes.
Absolutely. That is really insightful. And I would say definitely something that brings, I feel like I have a lot of assurance from your end, in as an Indian national myself, that this is an issue not just for us and the host country, but also for the flagship campus. And you're right in saying that they are equals. I mean, you just have another campus on
Exactly.
another soil, but it is your own campus as
Right.
well.
And also, for any Indian university, if you have high level research somewhere in the lab, and even some discussions without any labs, just abstract discussion about political science, you all have to deal with this issue, your academic freedom versus Indian national interest. So Indian university would have to be concerned about that too.
Yes.
So it is not an issue just particular to international branch of campus of a university.
Absolutely. And what I like about this is that there is no distinction between me and you, or the branch campus in India, or the branch campus at the home institution, or for that matter, the institution in India that is partnering with the foreign higher education institution. And the fact that we have to deal with it as one entity, and
Yes.
and that is the philosophy behind the National Education Policy's Study in India campaign as well,
Right.
because India hopes to have a lot more international students studying in India and become a global study destination.
Right.
And that is also one of the main focuses of this year's G20 summit, for which India is a host and is hosting the first G20 summit in Chennai. Has already done it this past week in IIT Madras, and education is at the forefront. And really interesting and really an exciting time to be, in India and talking about the international higher education space. And most importantly, something that has been left out of the guidelines and has been discussed during the G20 summit, and I think will be discussed during our the Acumen's Global Gateway Summit as well, is the importance of Gift City in Gujarat. That is a specially designated space that subsidizes the entry of international higher educations in India, international higher education institutions in India, if I may correct myself, and a designated space to have all of these in one place, whether it's fintech corporations, universities, and have that, I would say, a triple helix of industry, universities, and the community functioning together. And what is your, I would say, what is your perception about Gift City, or how do you see universities liking the idea too?
Well, I think that is something I had little experience in, because NYU Shanghai really was based in Pudong, Shanghai in China, and the context, it's very different from that gift city concept. I am willing to learn, and to learn from you, and also from other colleagues about how it was created at the first place, and what was the goals, from the city, the host city, in creating this space, but also what would be the benefits of the university who would take up the offer and create these branch offices. I have so much to learn in that space, and I'm sorry I couldn't answer that question, but I want to learn the fabric of these kind of project, and then I will have a better answer for you.
Absolutely, Hongxia. That is something that I also need to learn more about. So I'm hoping the Global Gateway Summit has a special delegation flying out to Gift
Yes.
City to understand more about the space and learn from people who are key contacts in its establishment and the government working in the area as well. So really interesting to see that. So one last question to you, Hongxia, is about moving beyond the branch campus model in India and expanding into the space of transnational education that has not become so much of a buzzword in India yet as it has around the world in the context of the UK, Australia,
Right.
and otherwise as well. And although the draft guidelines just talk about branch campuses in particular, do you think there are other models of transnational education or TNE that are very much a possibility in India? Whether that's franchise and validated,
Right.
twinning, articulation programs, or for that matter, even online degrees, and
Right.
that has been completely ruled out by the draft guidelines, I must point out, and then China has
Sure.
recently stopped them as well.
Right.
So, is there a possibility of any other model working
Yep.
out?
Well, again, before we talk about different models of these transnational education, we have to go back to our objective. The objective of course, the Indian government in terms of trying to increase the quality of education in India. And I think when we talk about quality of education, not quantity of the number of institutions or number of degrees you can give out, I think personally having branch campus of this international university in India perhaps would serve you the best. Because let's talk about online education. We have had 3 years pandemic. Many universities who do not give online degrees, however, have really relied online technology to teach in the last 3 years almost. So we have many feedbacks from students, from faculty, from parents, from staff, how this works. And it's not always good, especially for college education, because students, they learn not just by online technology in terms of subjects or skill parts of this education, but also that interpersonal exchange with faculty and with fellow students are so important in mold them intellectually, but also emotionally too, as a person that we are going to educate. And so I personally think what China has done serves the Chinese agenda very well, because India and China share this goal, is that they want really increase the quality of their own higher education. So to me, having seen how these last 3 years online education unfold, I personally think that kind of branch office would actually serve the quality objective much better. When there is a real campus, there is a real body of matriculated students, and by the means, it's students not only from your branch campus country, but also from other countries too.
Absolutely.
And you have faculty from your main campus coming from another culture, another country too. And all that becomes its own community of internationalism, of cosmopolitanism. And you create this better learning environment, better teaching environment, and better research environment. And also, I'm not just talking about students, faculty. I'm talking about staff too. And NYU Shanghai staff, actually, they're very international too. They come from different countries. And they are really contributors to this joint venture university as well. And they bring better practice, administrative practice internationally. And despite, our students and faculty, they conduct the teaching, learning, and then researching, but a lot of work are being carried by administrative staff behind the scene. So how they think, how they act, how they contribute, it's very important as well. So the operational side cannot be underplayed.
Absolutely.
So I think overall, a branch office have a branch office has a higher level of demanding for international thinking and international best practice. And because of that, I am advocate really for branch office. But of course, you can incorporate certain learning through online means. But that is means, not our goal.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much, Hongxia. You've, I think, perfectly summed up the objectives of the draft guidelines, and otherwise what it would truly mean to have a branch campus in India, and why it is so important, not only for the foreign institutions entering India, but also for India in its goal to enhance education and to bring quality, accessible and equitable higher education models in India. And definitely, I mean, we're looking on to the future. And if thank you so much for taking out time today to tell us so much about this. And I would definitely say that I didn't look at it from your lens before, but I see it from a new lens, and it's really enlightening, I would say. And I'm very thankful for sharing, you taking out the time to share your experiences. So thank you so much, Hongxia, for joining us today. Hopefully our next guest will be just as interesting as you.
Thank you so much. It's a great privilege and pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Hongxia.